First of all, I want to congratulate Jeff Adachi and Sheriff Hennessy and Ross Mercarimi and Kamala Harris and some of the other city officials for their work in trying to improve the level of services for people coming out of prison or coming out of jail. I think San Francisco in many ways stands alone in California and throughout most of the nation in the development of progressive policies, and I think we're fortunate to be living in such a community. However, before I begin, I've been asked to talk about funding. Is there anybody here who doesn't believe that reentry services should be expanded? Probably nobody would admit it after today. I'm not going to talk about the delivery of direct services. I think my colleagues on the panel here can do a better job of doing that. But I think to some degree, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I think what we have to be aware of is the political reality around funding reentry services in California. Particularly if we're talking about funding reentry services through the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And I am glad that they have shifted, at least trying to shift a philosophical direction. However, the reality may be something different for many years. Just to give you an idea, and we heard a little bit about it today, in the California Department of Corrections right now, there's 56,000 employees. Anybody know how many of those are working in the area of parole? 3,000. 3,000 out of 56,000. There are more administrators. In fact, there's 4,500 people working in the Department of Corrections and Administration than there are in parole. We spend about $34,000 a year to incarcerate one person in the state of California in our overcrowded, decrepit prisons. We spend about a little more than $4,000 per year for everybody on parole. So it kind of gives you an idea of where our emphasis is. I've been involved in this for almost 20 years, and I have been involved in it at the local level, and I've been involved in it at the state level. And frankly, if we are to expand reentry, if we are going to make reentry an actual reality where it becomes a major emphasis of the criminal justice system, the change is going to have to occur in Sacramento. Local communities cannot be expected to carry the burden of what essentially is a state-created mistake. The correction system in California is a disaster. And frankly, it's on the verge of collapse. We have 172,000 people stuffed into a prison system designed for 90,000. We parole approximately 120,000 of them a year. 70% return within a short period of time. And when their parole is revoked and they're returned to prison, they spend an average of 5 months incarcerated again in the same situation, under the same circumstances, and then they're paroled again, and the cycle begins again. And that's the way it works. It's a system designed to fail. It's a catch and release, what's been described as a fishing term, catch and release. We release them, then we trail them, we trail them, we nail them, and then we jail them. Now, in the recent years, and actually in the last 20 years, there's been a number of studies talking about policy studies, high-level policy studies by a number of statewide organizations, from the Legislative Analyst's Office to the Little Hoover Commission to the Senate Research Bureau, all these what we call nonpartisan research groups, including an independent committee set up by Governor Schwarzenegger, headed by Governor Duke Majan, no left-wing liberal. All of them come to the same conclusion, that California's correction system overemphasizes incarceration at the expense of reentry services, and in order to bring any sanity to the system, we have to shift back towards funding reentry services. We need to do it through parole reform and sentencing reform. That's been the mantra of policy experts in Sacramento for 20 years. Well, if it's been talked about for 20 years, why hasn't it happened? Why hasn't it happened? It's called interest group politics, folks. It's great that we're having meetings here in San Francisco talking about reentry reform, but the decisions are being made in Sacramento in isolation from things that are happening at the local level, whether it's here in San Francisco or Modoc County, it doesn't really matter. Because the interest groups that continue to support and sustain the current system, the current broken system, continue to wield power in Sacramento. And the decision making is not going to change until some political pressure is brought on our legislators in Sacramento, and specifically some of these interest groups. And I have to tell you, it's good to sit here. We have a wonderful sheriff here in San Francisco with a wonderful sheriff's department that has the most progressive programs of any sheriff's department in the country. It's a good thing. But let me tell you something. One of the biggest obstacles to change in Sacramento is the California Sheriff's Association. You know another big obstacle to change in Sacramento? The California District Attorneys Association. They will oppose everything, including fresh air, if it's offered to them. For a long time, the biggest obstacle, of course, was the prison guards union, because everybody knows they benefited from incarceration. Well, interesting enough, the prison guards union this past year went through I don't know what had happened, but they went through a change. And they decided that, you know what, the prison crowding is becoming a problem for them, for their members. And so they shifted and they started calling for changes in sentencing reform that would reduce the prison population in California, emphasizing a shift away from just incarceration and movement back to the counties and providing reentry services to the county. Great idea. I thought with the prison guards union and their $7 million that they raise each year to spend on more, that they used to spend on advocating more incarceration, we got this one.